Okay. Now, I know nobody's here right now live yet, but this video I'm gonna keep posted, obviously. So I'm just gonna pretend like I'm talking to somebody, which is hard for me, and that's why I don't do videos very often. Okay, happy full moon, lunar eclipse in Taurus. I'm gonna talk for a little bit just about general eclipse stuff and eclipse in Taurus stuff and this eclipse in general, like the fact that it's kind of conjunct Jupiter, and that it's the last in a series of eclipses in the Scorpio Taurus axis after a couple of years. And then I'm going to get into sign by sign horoscopes. And I will be doing my best to respond to the chat. But this is my first time doing it, so I don't know how good I'm going to be. Okay. All right, so the sign of Taurus, Scorpio's opposite sign. All the opposite signs, they have something in common though, and we don't often talk about what Scorpio and Taurus have in common. They seem like really opposite, and in some ways they are, but opposites attract, and they really like each other. Scorpio is a Mars ruled, which is where the sun is right now, is a Mars ruled sign. It's on the feminine yin side of things, as all water signs are. Scorpio is a water sign and all earth signs. So they're both yin, feminine. Um, and while Scorpio is ruled by Mars, Taurus is the earth sign ruled by Venus. So Mars and Venus on their own seem opposite, but they're not. They love each other. In Greek mythology, they were not married, but they did love each other. And so, and they're not the only two. So the other pair of signs ruled by Mars and Venus is Aries and Libra, and they're also opposite each other. So that's interesting to think about too. They go together and are opposite. Um, okay, so Scorpio is known for the depth, um, death, things we things that make a lot of people uncomfortable to talk about, sex, death, um, and shadow work and the psyche and trauma, Plutonian stuff. Um, Whereas Taurus is all like flowers and moo grazing in the fields and sensuality on a embodied level, and they don't really seem to have much in common. So let's explore that a little bit. Not for too long. I mean, we could talk about this forever. We could talk about just this forever. And that's a hard part for another hard part for me for doing videos is because everything's connected and I have a hard time focusing in on just talking about one little part of it. Okay, so they both share a certain sensuality. Scorpio is a very sensual sign, very which sensual, not we think of like sexual connotations when we hear sensual, but it's not just sexual, it's all the senses. Um, Taurus is more obviously and more talked about as a sensual sign, literally embodying all the senses and known for having good taste in all the things that our senses can experience. And whereas like Taurus is about consumption in some ways, Scorpio is about the exiting of what we have consumed and what comes out the other end after we've consumed it, after it's been digested, and then also going on subjects such as decomposition. And but what happens after things decompose? What happens after um, we throw something in the compost pile? It turns into fertile soil, which is a Taurus thing, and gets to grow more beautiful and nutritious plants um, and foods, which is a Taurus thing. So there's that connection, you know. Okay, so we're having this full moon. Full moons, all full moons are times of completion, blossoming. Um, I've literally witnessed so many times flowers in my garden blossom on a full moon. Um, and so they're kind of like peaks of energy, full moons, from what started on a new moon. So we're in a constant experience of many different cycles within cycles. The full moon and new moon cycle is one of our most regular ones. So on that scale, it is a coming to fruition and blossoming of what started at the full moon, at the new moon in some ways. So that's all full moons, and all full moons have a reputation for being more high energy. As far as the moon cycle relates to a female's menstrual cycle, the new moon is usually associated with her bleeding phase, where she's low energy and needs to go inward. And you're literally like letting go and releasing and clearing out. Whereas the full moon is associated with um, ovulation, where you're ready to party. Um, so that's a kind of general full moon vibe. Now this isn't just any full moon though either. So this is a solar eclipse. So eclipses are like intensified, um, roided up lunations in one way. They have all kinds of mystique and lore and mythology attached to them that we could go into. Again, I don't feel like I have time to go too deep into that. Scorpio hates that, not getting to go deep. Um, but on a basic level, a very intensified full moon, and in some ways, so if a full moon is completion of blossoming, then it's an intensified completion of blossoming. Okay, so what are we completing and blossoming? Then now this isn't just associated with just this moon cycle, it's associated with the whole eclipse cycle of Scorpio and Taurus eclipses. So we had 2 weeks ago, we had Aries solar eclipse. So I mean a Libra solar eclipse, which is part of a series that we're kind of starting, that kind of we dipped our toes in April of this year, but really starting to get going now, a series of Aries and Libra eclipses. And this is the last Scorpio Taurus eclipse after, I believe they probably started about late 2021, dipping our toes into it, or early 2022. We would have had a series every 6 months of Scorpio Taurus eclipses. And this is our last one. It's fitting that it's a full moon to wrap up that cycle. So some basic advice would be to look back on what happened over the last couple of years. Now, this is the the value of astrology in a big way is meaning making. So if you aren't adept at the language of astrology and all the archetypes and myths that come with learning about astrology, it might be harder to really look back and understand what the theme of the last year and a half or so was. Um, and that's why we'll get into the sign by sign stuff. I'll help you figure that out. But while we're going through that, also think back how that connects to, it's going to all connect to the last about year and a half to 2 years. Um, I want to also, I'm going to read a little bit just from, I have a couple of books here. The Astrologer's Notebook by Donna Van Toen and Eclipse Interpretation Manual by Rose Weinman. These I don't reference too much, but every once in a while I like to pick them up. So we'll just see what they have to say. So she goes into, in this one, Eclipse Interpretation Manual, she goes into, so for solar eclipses and for lunar eclipses, how they are aspecting your own chart. So that gets a little bit more specific. So she's like transiting solar eclipse conjunct natal moon, um, transiting lunar eclipse square natal Pluto, and stuff like that. So we won't be able to apply that because I'm not looking at your chart. But also on a more basic level, just also she gets into it through the houses. So if the lunar eclipse is falling in certain houses of yours, which is how I will be doing the horoscopes. That's how any astrologer does horoscopes, is where does it fall in the house of your chart. And if you don't know your rising sign, then the solar chart works just fine. So if you don't know what your rising sign is, but you are a Scorpio sun, then we would interpret a lunar eclipse in Taurus as in your solar seventh house. So that still works. If you know your rising sign, listen for both of them. Listen for your rising sign and your sun sign. But yeah, what house it falls in is the main method of interpretation there. Um, okay, so her basic interpretation of a lunar eclipse in Taurus. In the sign of the moon's exaltation, Taurus, a lunar eclipse expresses emotional constancy and internal serenity. So Okay, I'll let her continue. When it is paired with a Scorpio solar eclipse, which it wasn't this time, but we had a series of them previously, the inner strength it generates reinforces the forcefulness and purpose symbolic of Scorpio. Two, this combination carries sensual connotations. Taurus representing receptive sexuality and Scorpio signifying aggressive sexuality suggests completeness in sexual expression when operating together. Venus, as planetary ruler of both Taurus and Libra, projects similarities that bridge qualitative sign differences displayed by a Taurus lunar eclipse and a Libra solar eclipse, which appear in the same sequence to form an approaching quincunx by sign. Here, Venusian traits, as expressed through earthy Taurus, produce emotional stability that lends consistency to the harmonious, pleasing qualities associated with Libra. However, when a Taurus lunar eclipse accompanies a solar eclipse in Sagittarius, forming a departing quincunx by sign, which is not what we're doing right now, but one must strive harder to achieve a working rapport between the two. Plotting Taurus is no match for buoyant Sagittarius. Okay, so she brings up the good point that this last solar eclipse in Libra was ruled by Venus, and that this lunar eclipse is ruled by Venus too. So for the solar eclipse, in it was pretty sure it was still Venus in Virgo, and Venus is in Virgo right now for this one too. So that's another way. That's another part of interpreting the eclipse is so it's ruled by Venus. Where is Venus, and what is Venus doing? Venus in traditional astrology doesn't like to be in Virgo. It's kind of a really analytical sign and more concerned with practical matters. Venus doesn't, that's not really her typical domain. So she's kind of unresourced there. Um, it's like Cinderella, like beautiful maiden girl being made to do all the chores and for ungrateful family kind of vibes on one level. That could be one way of looking at it. Also though, let's see, I don't even have the chart pulled up. Let's pull up the chart. Just winging it. Okay, I don't think I can share my screen. Can I? Let me look. Yeah, no, I can't share my screen with this, so I'll just be looking at it. So Venus is in a trine to Jupiter, kind of coming out of a trine to Jupiter and going into a trine with Uranus. So Venus Uranus, this is like liberating Venus stuff. Love that liberates, um, friendship that liberates, or also like things you've never done before. Uranus is things you've never done before. So that really could show up as themes for this eclipse overall. These more Uranian, Venusian themes in harmony. Um, Also, yeah, that's about it that Venus is doing is the Jupiter thing. I mean, the moon's kind of it's applying to a trine. It's out of orb a little bit, but it's applying to trine Venus too. That's all very supportive. I like all that. I don't have my favorite book with me. I'm a little bummed. Ren Butler's Archetypal Universe. He goes into the planetary pairs for on an archetypal level, and Moon Venus is really sweet. And anytime the moon's in Taurus, it's kind of a sweetening of the Moon Venus happening. So like pleasure, Venus rejoices in the fifth house of pleasure, and it rejoices there because Venus is all about pleasure, and so I get to go to a Halloween party tonight at a friend's house. I get to be with friends. Venus is a friends thing, and have some fun. That's a good anytime the moon's in Taurus, especially a full moon, and especially a lunar eclipse. I bet I'm gonna have a great time. We're gonna eat delicious food, um, and drink delicious drinks. Watch the kids play. Probably hang out by a fire a little bit. Listen to some music. Laugh a lot. that's Taurus full moon stuff. So I hope for the rest of you that you get to do something like that. And if that's not in the cards exactly, eat a good meal, put on a comedy movie or a good romantic feel good movie, read a good story that's about that. Um, Surround yourself with beauty in some way. Okay, that's general. Oh, actually, one more book. I love my books. Moon Phase Astrology by Raven Caldera. Okay, so this is a really cool book. He goes into it's kind of you can apply it to transits and natal. He goes through every moon sign by phase. So he'll go through okay, Taurus in its new moon phase, Taurus in its waxing. Let's see what it was. Go ahead and follow them. Okay, so he goes through in for 8 different ones: new moon, crescent moon, waxing quarter moon, gibbous moon, full moon, decimating moon, which is the waning gibbous, and waning quarter moon, which is the last quarter, and then balsamic moon, which is the waning crescent. So it'll be the Taurus moon expressed through all those different phases, which I think is important. So Taurus moon, I should probably um, disclose that I'm a little biased because I was born on a full moon in Taurus, um, and I really love them. I love Scorpio season in general, but the full moon in Taurus is always so much fun. Um, okay, press back. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, 192. Okay, Earth Mother's moon, full moon in Taurus. Full moon in Taurus blossoms into the figure of the Earth Mother, who echoes in many ways the dryad of the long ago new moon, where the farmer was coming back. So the new moon in Taurus. So it's also linked up in a different kind of cycle to the new moon in Taurus, which would have been solar eclipse in Taurus back in it would probably May of this year, May or April. Okay, so where the farmer was coming back towards the understanding of an ecosystem, the Earth Mother is the ecosystem, or at least is in complete harmony with it. Her generosity is unbounded. She births many children and has enough room for all of them. She feeds and clothes all who come to her and makes sure that their bodies are taken care of in as much comfort as can be mustered. She is practical and works hard, but never forgets the lives that are important. If she has a fault, it is that she is more practical than empathetic, at least to her children and loved ones. They adore her and bless her for all that she gives them, and at the same time, they curse her for not showing each of them the favoritism they crave. She is not the Cancerian sea mother who moves out of feeling. She makes sure that all get their needs met if possible. If it's not, she expects the same stoic cooperation that she gives. If there is bounty left over, and she will work hard to make sure that there is, she will do her best to see that her selfish children get their desires met as well. Children are allowed to be selfish, that's okay. But as soon as someone takes more than one share and robs another, she is there with a stern word and an immovable will. Protective. Anyone with a Taurus full moon in their chart has the Scorpio sun. Very protective. Think Molly Weasley in Harry Potter. She's often personified as a Scorpio person, and I bet that full moon in Taurus too. Okay, sorry. She goes from gentle field to stone and bedrock in a moment. They will give the toy back now or suffer. They will eat their vegetables or go hungry. It's not that she has no patience, it's that she has endless patience and is willing to outweigh all her sullen and resentful loved ones, biding her time until they mature enough to understand the concept of doing what needs to be done. The Taurus full moon is not uncomfortable and is a not uncomfortable place to be, assuming that there are no major afflicting aspects. We're pretty good on that right now. The Earth Mother knows who she is, what she's doing, what she wants, and often enough how to get there with slow, careful steps. She is generous but has good boundaries, knows how to give and how much to keep for herself. She will be accused of coldness when her comforting warmth gives way to stubborn practicality, and she will be accused of slowness when she sticks to her plodding path rather than embracing new feelings. But neither of these accusations really bother her much in the end, even if they're true. On the Taurus full moon, we take care of our bodies and the bodily needs of others. Yes. Don't try to shift the focus to emotional needs. Those are important, but the emotional is fed through the body. But the physical must come first, or all else will suffer, a truth that the Taurus moon understands. This book was written before that awesome book, The Body Keeps the Score, which helped us all see how our emotions live in our body and are healed through the body first and foremost. It's not that we're not focusing on emotional needs, it's that focusing on the physical body heals the emotional. Are you eating healthy? Is there medical care that you need and aren't seeking? Are you getting enough sleep? This is especially important to Taurus. If you spend the entire period simply catching up on your sleep, the moon will approve. Do you enjoy the feel of your clothing on your skin, or are you sacrificing comfort for stylishness? Ooh. Are you getting enough hugs and regular body contact, or are you suffering from skin hunger? Are there small pains and annoyances in your physical surroundings that you endure every day that with a little bit of practical organization or elbow crease could be eliminated? The Taurus full moon asks these questions in a simple and straightforward manner, and we tend to blow them off, but to our peril. They are more important than we can imagine. Okay, some quotes for the Earth Mother's moon. Ecology has become the political substitute for the word mother. A mother is a person who, seeing there are only 4 pieces of pie for 5 people, promptly announces she never did care for pie. My own recipe for world peace is a little bit of land for everyone. I like that one. Sometimes in a moral struggle, we discover the right thing to do, just as on some cold day long ago, we discovered mittens pinned to our coat sleeve. You come to nature with all your theories, she knocks them all flat. In our own beginnings, we are formed out of the body's interior landscape. For a short while, our mother's bodies are the boundaries and personal geography which are all that we know of the world. Once we no longer live beneath our mother's heart, it is the earth with which we form the same dependent relationship, relying on its cycles and elements, helpless without its protective embrace. War on nations changes maps. War on poverty maps change. Muhammad Ali said that. I'll say that again. War on nations changes maps. War on poverty maps change. The lust for comfort, that stealthy thing that enters the house as a guest and then becomes a host and then a master. A living planet is a much more complex metaphor for deity than just a bigger father with a bigger fist. If an omniscient, all powerful dad ignores your prayers, it's taken personally. Hear only silence long enough and you start wondering about his power, his fairness, his very existence. But if a world mother doesn't reply, her excuse is simple. She never claimed conceited omnipotence. She has countless others clinging to her apron strings, including myriad species unable to speak for themselves. To her elder offspring, she says, go raid the fridge, go play outside, go get a job, or better yet, lend me a hand. I have no time for idle whining. Okay. All right. So I think that's a pretty good rundown on the Taurus full moon, the eclipse in general. Um, One more thing I want to mention is that even though this is a full moon and eclipse in Taurus, the nodal axis is in Aries and Libra right now, but we call the eclipse by whatever sign the lunation occurs in. And as long as it's within a certain amount of degrees from the lunar nodes, it's an eclipse. And this is a full moon conjunct the pretty loosely, it's not super tight, but it's conjunct the north node, the north lunar node, known as Rahu in Vedic astrology, and the mouth of the dragon in the mythology attached to that. So kind of fitting with Taurian themes, um, the north node, and so lunations and planets conjunct the north node is associated with increase, whereas the south node is associated with decrease. And we're on constant cycles of increase and decrease. And increase isn't always good, and decrease isn't always bad. If you have a tumor, you don't want it to increase. If you have war and violence, you don't want it to increase. Right now, we have this one is conjunct the north node, and it is also known as the hungry ghost. So it's this ravenous mouth head of the dragon that's never satiated because it's disconnected from its stomach and tail, the south node. And this is kind of a metaphor for this earth realm that we live in, the realm of hungry ghosts where we are never satisfied. one desire after another. Um, and when we fulfill one desire, another desire pops up. And that's kind of a hallmark of being here in this incarnation is these insatiable desires. So it's kind of also in alignment with the Scorpio Taurus stuff too. Um, and so while those desires though um, are what keeps the story going. They are what keeps the wheel kind of turning in our human lives. The trick is to not to learn to be less attached to the outcomes. So, so regardless of any sign associations, just eclipses conjunct eclipses are always going to involve both the south and north node, but they will fluctuate on which one's more in focus. So this is kind of bringing those desires into focus and increase and more and more and more. Um, and by bringing that into focus, just like by bringing shadows into light, we make them not shadows anymore. Um, we simultaneously learn that those desires, hopefully, learn and think about how those desires aren't actually fulfilling us and what might actually fulfill us. And that's where the South Node comes in. It usually is associated with kind of some loss and grieving, and it's also known as maybe the most spiritual point in the chart um, because it shows us what's really important, the stuff that kind of brings us to our knees and strips us of everything to show us what's really important. And it's usually it's never those earthly desires represented by the North Node. So, but we're here, we're human. As Ram Dass says, just try being human. You're human. You have your hatred, your ill will, your desires, and a lot of good things too. Um, but let's not lose sight of the beauty of being human too. And go ahead and be human, but be less attached to the outcomes um, of wanting our desires. And don't expect fulfillment of those desires to bring like true lasting peace or happiness. Okay, moving on. Let's get into the sign by sign stuff. All right. It shows I do have a few people listening. Anybody want to pipe in the chat if you're there, what your sign is, what you want me to, if you want me to do one first, do something first or not, I will. If not, I'm going to go ahead and start with Aries because they like to be first. Okay. So for Aries, we do sun or rising sign or moon sign if you're a night birth, some would say. A series that fell in your second and eighth houses. So this specific one, this full moon, will be specifically in your second house. Second house is mostly associated with resources, money, skills, earned income, as opposed to the eighth house, which in modern standard astrology gets associated with a lot of a lot of things, but I mostly always see it show up as a money house too, but a different kind of money than the second house. That would be like your partner's money or other people's money because it's the second house from the seventh house, or just unearned income. So let's say tax returns or inheritance or um, what's other unearned income? Any kind of money from like the government. That would be unearned income as opposed to the second house. So while there's themes there for the themes of the last 1.5 to 2 years would have involved um, both of those topics. So other people's money, unearned income, your partner's money, and your own. They're always connected. Your own earned income, your own skills, your own resources. Um, and also so any liquid assets, I really put liquid assets in the second house and non-liquid assets more in the fourth house. um So it might have been a time where money wasn't focused in some way. Um, Now with this full moon here, this is a final um, completion of this and intense completion and blossoming of this cycle. So whatever you've been working on for the past couple of years, money wise, skills wise, um, this is kind of its peak and climax, and you're on to like a different story and a different narrative after this. It Now you got Jupiter there too, so you've had Jupiter there, I don't know, some maybe like 6 months, maybe like 6 months left there, Jupiter there. So this might show that you do have income and earned income and resources right now. Like that's not a problem for you. Resources haven't been a big problem. Doesn't mean there might not have been any shakiness there or any challenges there, but you do have resources. You do have what you need, um, especially after just getting off of the North Node transiting through there. That shows an increase in earned income. Um, Now that might not so much be the focus. Now you're heading into these series of this is the last one there, and now you're heading into a series of eclipses in your first and seventh houses, which is way more kind of potent and noticeable. Like this is the core of who you are as a person and your most important relationships. Um, so over the course of about the next year and a half, the eclipses that are starting in Libra and Aries are really going to completely transform who you who you are. Now, also that might be more subtle than you think. Like it can look like going to therapy, and at the end of this year and a half thing, you really are a different, more healed nervous system than you were before. I know some Aries that are they're becoming parents for the first time. I know some Aries that are going through some definite restructuring in their intimate relationships, and that's gonna play out over the next year and a half. You don't become parents in one day or one moment. It takes a long time to kind of sink in, and then obviously it's a continuous evolving. But for that first one, I think a year and a half is a good measure of this is the time it took that we become parents. So yeah, that's about it. Shifts in your self perception and self image. Um, and it shouldn't be. Sometimes people get scared of eclipses in their first and seventh houses. I wouldn't be scared. I just came out of it. I'm Scorpio rising, Taurus moon, Scorpio sun, so I just came out of that series of eclipses there. I did do some EMDR, some therapy. I do feel very different in my nervous system now than I did at the start of it all, on a basic level, and a lot of other really more subtle things. Uh, okay, so there you have it. We're on Aries to Libra. So for Libra, technically, the solar eclipse in Taurus would be in their eighth house. So this could have to do with your partner's resources, unearned income. Um, Maybe since this is the last one, the same with Aries, this is the last one in a series in your second and eighth houses. Um, Whereas this one, the climax is coming kind of more in the eighth house, so more to do with your partner's finances, though. Um, and then you're heading into this. So 2 weeks ago, you had your first solar eclipse in Libra, your sign, and you're heading into a series of them in Libra Aries. So same thing with Aries. This is more big deal VIP placement for eclipses in your life. And same with Aries. It really can be a lot of similar themes, just revisioning your self-image and how you see yourself, um, and also stuff to do with your partnerships and your marriages and your intimate relationships. Um, there might literally be some for both of you with this eclipse. I would definitely look out for something with money in some way for both of you to pop up this weekend or over the course of the next couple of weeks, or maybe it already did in the past couple of weeks. Um, Let me know in the comments if something with money did come up, kind of a big thing, whether it was subtle or obvious. Okay, moving on. We'll do Taurus next. So this is a full moon in your sign, and an eclipse, and the last one in series. So if you're a Taurus sun or rising, you've been going through this in your first and seventh house, but with Jupiter present, co-present in your first house. So there's been some kind of personal expansion going on already for the last 6 months, and then we're kind of reaching a peak or climax of that. Um, Trying to think of Taurus people I know, and what's going on in their lives. Um, Taurus being so much about resources on its own. I'm seeing the Taurus people I know, um, they they have actually really changed a lot, of their self-image. They're still themselves at their core, but um, maybe made some big decisions, and let some things go, about themselves over the past year and a half to kind of remake themselves into something new. And again, the focus on relationships. Okay. I just remember that one of my closest Taurus friends, they moved in with their girlfriend for the first time, and that was like a really big move. So that's again the first house, seventh house. So big changes to yourself and your partnerships. And this is kind of a completion on that. So and not only did they move in, that's right, he proposed. So they'll be getting married. And that happened while you're in the middle of this series of eclipses in the first and seventh house. So that's kind of a typical Taurus thing, I think there. Um, and it's more like textbook expression. And Jupiter in the first house too, that's a lucky time. That's good luck and expansion on a lot of levels. And when Jupiter moves on in a few months to Gemini, that's your second house of money, and you're gonna get a little bit of influx on that income thing, to kind of coincide though with you starting to have a series of eclipses in your 12th and 6th house once it moves on after this Taurus eclipse here. Um, it's going to move into your 12th and 6th house, which is kind of more of an isolating time, which makes sense. Just going with the marriage thing, it's common after we uh, get into relationship or commit in a relationship, in a serious relationship like that, that you kind of isolate, isolate yourselves together, and kind of incubate and really get to know the relationship more, but you might be less out in the world together. That's a 12th house, sixth house thing. So that might be what you're going into, as opposed to like what you're now like culminating, um, was more about like finding yourself. Now you're going to be alone with yourself and your significant other. Um, Trying to think back. Okay, so moving on to Scorpio, opposite Taurus. So again, the last eclipses have been in your first and seventh axis, and this is the last one. So for Scorpio rising and Scorpio sun, the Taurus full moon is falling in your seventh house partnership. So it might actually apply to this particular one, this particular wave might apply to your partners, your significant others, your spouses, more than yourself, or intimate friendships, business partners, um, and them experiencing some kind of completion or blossoming or culmination, or just your marriage or partnership in general, being at a peak. I can see it being a good time for that. Now that eclipses can be extreme in many directions, so maybe there'll be some breakups, but I also really look around me and see just a lot of good and like peak relationship vibes going on for Scorpios. And if you do not have intimate relations with anybody else, it could be a time when somebody comes into your life, for sure, for Scorpio. And again, Scorpio, you're heading into this last Libra eclipse was in your 12th house, um, whereas for Taurus, it was in their 6th house, and you're going to have some eclipses coming up in your 6th house, and they're going to have some eclipses coming up in their 12th house. Um, might be a time of more, after you just kind of had yourself remade and new self image with these 1st and 7th house eclipses. Now, it might be a time of kind of being with yourself and a little more isolating and focusing on the 6th house stuff, which is work. It might be a time of putting in some hard work coming up here. Okay. Move on. Let's do Gemini next. Okay. Geminis. So for Geminis, Taurus is your 12th house. And so you're coming out. I feel really repetitive doing this right now. But you're coming out of all that stuff that Scorpio and Taurus are going into. So again, Scorpio and Taurus, you can look to your Gemini and Sagittarius friends. Killed a mosquito. I hate these guys. Dead. Die, mosquito. Got him. So Taurus, Scorpio people, you might want to look to your Gemini, Sagittarius friends for some examples of what they've been through for the last year and a half or so. And also, I failed to mention this, just for eclipse interpretation in general, you want to look back at 9 years ago, and some themes will be similar. That would have been the nodal axis reversed, but in the same signs, and also 18 years ago, and that might have been a lot more similar, um, to give you clues of what might be in store. Okay, but also for Taurus, yeah, Taurus, Scorpio people, look at the Gemini, Sagittarius for your friends for clues as to what your next year and a half might be like, and kind of going backwards like that too. So the Aries and Libra people can look at their Scorpio and Taurus friends for clues as to what their next year and a half might have in store. Um, so this is a culmination in your 12th house. It might have been dealing with a little bit of isolation in some way, um, and there might be some kind of culmination of that here. Now, the 12th house isn't just isolation; that's just a keyword. Let's get out of that isolation. Let me look for some other hints of how to talk about the 12th house with eclipses. Okay, lunar eclipse in the natal 12th house. Okay, so this is going to go from a more modern standard perspective. In the 12th house, a lunar eclipse rouses the subconscious and stirs psychic and spiritual tendencies. What do you think, Gemini? Have you had your psychic and spiritual tendencies stirred, or Sagittarius, or over the past year and a half? Well, now it might be a culmination of that in some way. Maybe you have some kind of psychic, mystical, spiritual experience that I hope so. Oh, that would be so much fun for you. Okay. One instinctively reaches out to the intangible realm for emotional support and usually grows more receptive to psychic and spiritual influences. Paired with a 6th house solar eclipse, which you will have a series of coming up, a 12th house lunar eclipse generates substantial psychological support to 6th house development. It also brings out natural instincts that encourage good healthcare practices. In sequence with a 5th house solar eclipse, which you're not having? No. Okay, so a 12th house solar eclipse, when combined with a. Oh, wait, hold on. Are you? Yeah, okay, because it is combined with 5th, because this is your last one from the 12th house, 6th house stuff. and then you're moving to the 11th and 5th house. So in sequence with the 5th house solar eclipse, which you're going to have, hold on, Gemini, Libra, which you had 2 weeks ago. A 12th house lunar eclipse points to hidden inhibitions or psychological blocks that interfere with 5th house expression. It calls for close scrutiny of emotional attitudes described in the 12th house that influence one's relationship with your children, one's approach to romance, one's creative self expression, and other 5th house matters. That's all 5th house stuff. Okay, so getting into that more subconscious, spiritual, psychic realm stuff, more of a culmination of that that you hopefully have been working on and coming to you over the past year or so. And that's going to feed into this next cycle of eclipses in your 11th and 5th houses, which are the 5th house being about your children, romance, and creative self expression. So hopefully that feeds into a more vital life in those realms. Okay, so Sagittarius, looking at my notes. Sagittarius is the opposite. This full moon this eclipse is in your 6th house, the last one in a series of in your 6th and 12th houses. And then after that, and you just had the solar eclipse in your 11th house, and you're going to start having eclipses in your 11th house. Now, 11th house is your hopes and dreams and friends, and 5th house, creativity, children, creative self expression, even small businesses, pleasure, recreation, fun. But this is your last one in the 6th house, which is work. So lunar eclipse in the 6th house. The lunar eclipse in the 6th house stresses the importance of emotional well-being to one's state of health. So the 6th house is very much about health, illness, and jobs and work and service. Okay, so a lunar eclipse in the 6th house stresses the importance of emotional well-being to one's state of health and the job atmosphere. One usually tries to form relationships in the work sphere with persons in whose company he or she feels emotionally secure and comfortable. A 6th house lunar eclipse, 12th house solar eclipse cycle arrangement balances the physical and the spiritual. 6th house interests reinforce 12th house development. A 6th house lunar eclipse with an 11th house solar eclipse combination suggests that health and work related frustrations compromise one's capacity to reach out in humanitarian love. If deficiencies in the 6th house go unchanged and helpful 6th house avenues remain unrecognized, selfish a little bit. Um, so Sagittariuses that I know, they have been focusing a lot on work. Um, Maybe to the neglection of their emotional life. Um, and now this might be an invitation to really see moon being emotions. That's why she keeps putting lunar eclipse up as an emotional to do with your emotional life, which makes sense. That's okay. Um, Culmination of looking how your work life has affected your emotional life, and maybe some messages coming through about that. Okay, we're gonna move on to Cancers and Capricorn. Okay, so Cancer, Taurus your is your 11th house. Scorpio your 5th house. So you're coming into yeah, I mean you're completing this 11th house, 5th house cycle. Um, I would think for Cancer risings and Cancer suns, there's been a big shift in your tribe and who you keep around you and allow to be your friends. Starting in late 2021, early 2022, there might have been some big shifts in your friendship and your circle and your tribe. And your sense of in your relationship with your children maybe has gone through a lot of big changes in the past couple of years. Your relationship to pleasure and fun might have had a lot of new beginnings and endings. Um, And so now you're having a culmination of that. So this is your last eclipse in your fifth house. I mean, in your 11th house for cancers. So for Cancer, lunar eclipse in the 11th house. A lunar eclipse in the 11th house denotes a period during which one derives emotional satisfaction through participation in group activities and humanitarian causes. So they're equating the 11th house with small groups, which I do too. So not just friends and tribe, but small groups in general. Um, this placement brings out altruistic tendencies, instincts, and creates inner awareness of the need to play an unselfish role in the society to which one belongs. The so reflections on yourself as a member of a group in a bigger human family. The inner security one gains through 11th house activities and relationships, and it reinforces the capacity to sustain romantic relationships, to express oneself creatively, and to enjoy life according to the promise of the fifth house when an 11th house lunar eclipse accompanies a fifth house solar eclipse. An 11th house lunar eclipse, fourth house solar eclipse, which is what you're coming into here. I mean, we just had that lunar solar eclipse in Libra would have been in your fourth house 2 weeks ago, and you're heading into a series of fourth and 10th house eclipses. Fourth house is your physical home and family, your foundations. So an 11th house lunar eclipse today, mixed with a fourth house solar eclipse a couple weeks ago and the next couple of years, indicates that in order to effectively utilize interests of both houses, it is helpful to host group meetings and entertain friends in the home. That's hilarious. It's a Cancer rising person whose party I'm going to tonight. She loves entertaining friends in her home, always. Um, okay, yeah, so in order to effectively utilize interests of both houses, it is helpful to host group meetings and entertain friends in the home. With this configuration, it is important that 11th house attitudes and activities, friendships, small groups, be modified to accommodate developmental needs of the fourth house, the family, and the home. Okay. So, trying to think of other Cancer rising people I know. Okay. I am thinking of some Cancer rising people, and they have had some definite themes of having to reevaluate their relationship to pleasure and fifth house topics because of the incoming of children, another fifth house topic, which are fun and pleasurable in their own way, but maybe different than people used to being not with children are used to. Um, and that's also feeding into these series of eclipses coming into Cancer's fourth and 10th houses, which are going to be probably a complete revisioning of how they see their career and home and family, and maybe either um, sacrificing, having to make some sacrifices or new beginnings or changes in one because of changes in the other for cancers. Um, okay, so Capricorn. For Capricorn, Taurus is their fifth house. So again, same as Cancer have had the series of eclipses in their fifth house and 11th house over the last few years, heading into the fourth house, 10th house. But this is a culmination coming really from a more fifth house kind of place. So it might actually might even just be about not about your relationship with children or um, having children, but about your children. If you do already have children, this series of eclipses could have been about big changes in your children's lives. Um, let's see. So culminating here, your last eclipse for a long time in your fifth house. A lunar eclipse in the fifth house accents emotional, affectional needs associated with children, romance, pleasure, and creative expression. One instinctively seeks inner satisfaction through fifth house relationships, entertaining activities, and the hobbies he or she enjoys. I like that. So, like, kinda been, about pleasure and hobbies and recreation and what you find fun and enjoyable. Feelings of emotional well-being derived from 5th house interests and relationships support development of 11th house potentials, so friendships and small groups. In that house, it's paired with the lunar eclipse in the 5th. A 5th house lunar eclipse, 10th house solar eclipse, which you would have had a couple weeks ago and you're heading into a series of Capricorn, combination indicates lack of perspective between pleasurable interests and worldly affairs. Usually, the individual becomes overly occupied with career advancement, 10th house, and goals and other 10th house matters, and reputation, even 10th house is a reputation thing, to the exclusion of 5th house activities, unless a conscientious effort is made to balance emotional and ego related needs. So it's relating the 10th house to ego stuff. I kind of see it as more of a first house thing, but it's all connected. In this instance, business and pleasure do mix well, and it is up to the individual to adjust attention accordingly. Okay. So, series of eclipses in your 10th and 4th house coming up, which you can look to the Aquarius and Leo people in your life for clues, and what they've been going through the last year and a half or so as to what stuff related to 10th house, which is career and goals, and your reputation, and peak experiences, um, and 4th house, which is home, family, roots, ancestry. Um, so that's what you're in for, and you're culminating this last cycle with that full moon eclipse in your 5th house, pleasure, fun relationships, romantic relationships, um, and children, relationships with children, something about your children coming up. Um, Thinking of Capricorns, I know, um, my Capricorn son has joined all kinds of clubs in school. He goes to a different club after school almost every day. So that's very like 11th house and 5th house, like pleasure and fun for him. Yeah, okay, leave it at that. I'm getting hungry. I only got like 20 more minutes. I can do this. We got who else we got left? We got Aquarius, Leo, Pisces, and Virgo left. Okay, so we'll do Leo next. Leo, Taurus is your 10th house. So you've been going through this cycle of eclipses in your 10th house and 4th house, and you're headed into a series of eclipses in your 9th house and 3rd house. So 10th house, culminating here, Leo. Um, so there might be some sense of completion in as far as your careers, goals, reputation that's been building over the past year and a half. Um, maybe maybe it's time to set aside your career um, that you've been working on for more hanging out with your family. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're really been putting a lot of time into your career and your goals, and not so much into being at home or with your family um, at all. For Leo 2, I'm thinking of Leos I know, and these Scorpio Taurus eclipses are in their 10th and 4th house. They're secondary only to the 1st and 7th house. So for everybody put through, like Scorpio and Taurus would have been put through the ringer the most by this last year and a half in this eclipse, and Leo and Aquarius are second only to that. So whereas the 1st and 7th house are known as VIP houses, this is you and your intimate partnerships, the two usually most important things in your life that make up who you are. And then the 10th house and 4th house is your career, which is usually a huge part of people's lives or their goal or what they um like for say stay at home moms, that we can look at that is your career. That's what you do and what you think of as what you do. Um and like your purpose even in the world. Um, and And then the 4th house, your home and your family and your ancestors. Those are called the VIP houses for a reason. So this is a culmination for Leos, in happening specifically in that 10th house of, um, what did I just say that I liked? I forgot. Um, okay, let's see. Let's see what Rose has to say. Okay, so lunar eclipse in the 10th house. One seeks career endeavors that are emotionally satisfying when a lunar eclipse occupies the 10th house and instinctively turns to avenues and associated relationships that provide inner satisfaction. One derives a sense of inner fulfillment in his or her worldly accomplishments that differs from the ego satisfaction and self pride sought in public recognition when a solar eclipse occupies the 10th house. Okay, so one derives a sense of inner fulfillment in his or her worldly accomplishments. I can see that. Even with the Leos I know that might be having to put their 10th house stuff down for health reasons. They put a lot of work in their life into their career, and now it's being shown to not be important. But also, I can see how this might be a culmination of, and maybe some things happening. Maybe if they are retiring, maybe they're being um, given some accolades and recognition for their accomplishments there and getting to kind of come to terms emotionally with those accomplishments. It's this inner satisfaction and sense of emotional well-being derived from worldly interests that contributes to progress of family affairs when a 10th house lunar eclipse is paired with a 4th house lunar eclipse. In combination with a 3rd house lunar eclipse, in combination with a 3rd house solar eclipse, which you would have had 2 weeks ago, a 10th house lunar eclipse directs attention to fruitful career avenues and identifies futile or inadequate lines of endeavor. In order that 3rd house development, the solar eclipse, reach full potential and related experiences be put to practical use, it is important that one pursue positive 10th house directions. Okay, she really didn't say anything about the 3rd house there. Okay, so the 3rd house, which is where your solar eclipse in Libra would have been a couple weeks ago, and the 3rd house, 9th house is going to be coming into focus here. After this culmination and ending of the 10th house, 4th house series. The 3rd house is your day to day activities. Kind of can be some mundane things, your neighborhood, your neighbors, the post office, places you might go on a regular basis, the grocery store, school, and like local travel. It also is associated just in modern standard astrology with the mind. Um, the mind moves a lot, and there's movement associated with the 3rd house. The moon is said to be, I'm pretty sure when they say the moon is said to be in her joy in the 3rd house, it's because the moon moves a lot. Um, and 3rd house is also to do with siblings, so it might have had something to do this for Leo's the solar eclipse a couple weeks ago, and what you're heading into. Maybe a focus on sibling relationships or what's going on with your siblings. Um, Whereas it might have been more all about you and what you're going through recently. Now there might be more of a focus on your siblings. For Leos, also, this solar eclipse a couple weeks ago was in your ninth house, was in your 3rd house, but you're heading into this series of 3rd house and ninth house, and the ninth house is going to be more a spiritual place. It might be. It's associated with ways of knowing. The ninth house is ways of knowing, so that can be religion, spirituality, philosophy, higher education, world travel. It's known as the house of God too. So whatever your relationship with God and the spiritual and wisdom and those big questions of why are we here, and where are we going and what is the meaning of life, like all of that kind of really coming into focus over the next couple of years. Um, so yeah, your beliefs in your um also your community. So beliefs, ninth house, community, 3rd house. Um, so you might lean more on your community or lean into more your community too as part of that. Okay. Aquarius, moving on. Uh, so for Aquarius, this solar eclipse in Taurus is your fourth house. And so culminating and completing a cycle of eclipses that have been in your 10th house and fourth house, culminating it with a lunar eclipse in your fourth house. And then you're going to be heading into a series of eclipses in your third and seventh house. But this eclipse, third and ninth, but this eclipse that we just had 2 weeks ago would have been your ninth house. Okay, so last eclipse in your fourth house, there's something about your home and your family and your roots and your ancestry coming to completion. You might something about where you live now might be ending, and by say maybe 6 months from now, you might have decided or know where you might be living next. Maybe you're going to be moving out of a home that has maybe been associated with your family, and um, maybe more move somewhere that is more about community, um, community and kin that aren't those like family that is like your mother and father or you as a mother and father, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, so Aquarius, full house, full moon in your fourth house here, your last lunar eclipse for a while in the fourth house, some kind of completion as regards your home base of operations and what you see as home and how you feel about home and define home, I think. And then headed into and then a couple weeks ago you had that solar eclipse in your ninth house. So something about your beliefs in God and the way you see the world and these big questions maybe coming up and or maybe getting some attention. Also, maybe it could be like, I know an Aquarius rising that is applying for college applications, higher education, um, as she during this they're due in 2 weeks. That's my daughter. So she's Aquarius rising and she's doing college applications and they're due in 2 weeks, and so that's her focus right now. And so with the lunar eclipse and solar eclipse 2 weeks ago in her ninth house for her as an Aquarius, that's how that showed up. And for her, she's going to be leaving the house. This is going to be this time next year. She most likely will not be living in this home anymore. But happy for her. Um, I know another Aquarius that I think is probably grappling with living somewhere else besides where they live right now. It might be somewhere else by this time next year. Um, that really kind of just wrapped up this cycle of this is really wrapping up. This is stuff about your home and family right now. Um, and then over the course of the next year and a half, that ninth house, third house stuff is going to come more into focus. Your community, neighborhood is going to be different, and ninth house, higher education might be literally going to college, might be moving to another country, might just be having a lot of new beginnings and change in your beliefs and relationship with God, spirituality, philosophy. Same with Leo. So that's for Aquarius. Okay, let's read what she has to say about your solar eclipse, lunar eclipse in the fourth house, Taurus. So, okay. So for Aquarius in the fourth house, the moon's domain, a lunar eclipse evokes domestic family instincts. Since inner security and emotional fulfillment depend upon family relationships and domestic stability, one tries to create the type of home atmosphere and family life in which he or she feels emotionally secure. When paired with 10th house solar eclipses, a fourth house lunar eclipse lends emotional support to worldly ambitions. One's inner sense of purpose backs up and reinforces ambitious drives expressed in 10th house affairs. So that's what you're culminating and finishing up here. And you're heading into fourth house lunar eclipse, ninth house solar eclipse combination indicates that home and family life influences one's capacity to reaching out intellectually, ninth house, through higher education or travel, and that lack of an emotionally supportive domestic atmosphere can hinder intellectual, physical, philosophical growth. So reflections on how having an emotionally supportive domestic atmosphere, home and family, can help your intellectual and philosophical and religious and spiritual growth. Okay, I like that. Okay, so last but not least, Pisces, Virgo. We'll start with Virgo, kind of going in order there. So for Virgo, Taurus is your third house. And so this full moon eclipse is in your third house of siblings, neighborhood, community, um, short trips, the mind. Could be literally show up about stuff with your vehicle too, cars. Um, and so you've had this series of eclipses in your third house and ninth house already. That's what all that stuff I just talked about for Leo and Aquarius that they're coming into. That's what you're coming out of. This is your last one. Um, and you're headed into a series of eclipses in your second and eighth houses of money. And the eclipse 2 weeks ago would have been in your second house of money and resources and skills. So new beginnings there. Um, but right now, culminating this third house stuff. So it could be about your siblings for Virgo. It could be more about their neighbors or the siblings or their neighborhood. Something to do with that culminating or blossoming out of the cycle of the past year and a half or so. I know of Virgo rising whose sister is literally blossoming with pregnancy. Big change for her. So that's like eclipse third house stuff is big changes for your siblings. That same Virgo rising has a brother that's in Italy right now traveling. So you can see how again that those third house, ninth house stuff's not always about you personally. It could be, but it could also be about your siblings and showing up in that way. Um, but okay, so third house. I remember an eclipse in my third house, a lunar eclipse in my third house, which would have been a few years ago for me, like 3 or 4 years ago. I was just doing kind of some mundane stuff, and I was like, I knew what the ninth house one was about. I had quit school um, with my ninth house eclipses, and I was wondering grad school. I quit grad school. I was wondering, okay, what's this third house eclipse for me? Because I don't really have any. I have a half brother, but he's not really in my life much. So nothing with that popped up. I don't think so. But what I noticed that I was doing, and that's one of the best things you can do for things like this. What does the eclipse mean? Pay attention to what you're doing and then assign more meaning to it. So what did I find myself doing? I found myself going through my files. My filing system is like every piece of important paper or documents, I just kind of throw it in a pile. And then like once a year, I go through the pile and actually file it. So I had like a box full of papers and documents that I had collected through the year or so. And I went through and organized and actually filed and put them all away. That to me was third house and like a finishing up of what had been building in that third house atmosphere, which is mundane kind of paperwork. It sometimes gets associated with Gemini and Mercurial stuff too. Um, so it could be something like that, mundane. We think of other Virgos I know, like anything like third house, like that kind of popping up. I don't know. There might be like a lot of paperwork and filling out things going on, which seems mundane, but let's assign more meaning to it, okay? It's, let's just make it magical and not mundane because we say so. Okay. All right, so let's see what Rose has to say about third house lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse in the third house lends emotional and psychic touches to mental perceptions, associating the third house with the mind. Feelings play a larger role in the reasoning process. Okay, I like that. Feelings being the full moon, the eclipse lunar moon. Okay. One grows more intuitive and imaginative during the period of eclipse influence and seeks inner satisfaction from mental accomplishments. A third house lunar eclipse, ninth house solar eclipse pair produces an atmosphere conducive to higher intellectual development, for here basic mental skills support intellectual growth on a broad scale. A third house lunar eclipse, eighth house solar eclipse, which is this combination, points out the need to adjust negative mental emotional attitudes that inhibit development of eighth house affairs. One must develop more positive and objective approaches to third and eighth house matters. That's another one where I don't feel like she said much. Um, so this lunar eclipse a couple days ago would have been solar eclipse couple weeks ago would have been in the second house about money. So for Virgos, some kind of big new beginnings happening with skills, resources, money, and going into this period of the next year and a half where you're going to have it in your second and eighth houses. So something about your partner's money or unearned income too, or inheritances coming up. Um, there might be so you're going into a period where there might be less of that unearned income, um, and more of the income having to come from uh, your own skill set, and seeing that come to fruition. More income coming from your skills and your inner resources too. Okay, so for Pisces, this this lunar eclipse today is in your ninth house. Um, and you're coming out of this series of eclipses in your ninth and third house, but it's culminating today with this one in the ninth house. And you're going to be heading into a series of eclipses in your second and eighth money houses too. But this one a couple weeks ago would have been in your eighth house. So today for this your last lunar eclipse for a while in your ninth house. For Pisces, something coming up definitely about higher education, wisdom traditions, God, religion, world travel, ways of knowing. And it can also be legal things. Ninth house can also be legal things. But this is the ending of a cycle. So if there was some kind of legal stuff going on, there's some kind of culmination happening right now um, of that. And yeah, I think just really from what I know about Pisces, the Pisces people in my life, um, really kind of some reformation of their spiritual beliefs and philosophies, and kind of maybe thinking on a larger, more global scale and bigger ways than they did before and have previously. And then this lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse a couple weeks ago in your eighth house, your of unearned income, your partner's income. Something might be happening if it hasn't happened already with your um, partner's or spouse's income. Um, but you're going to be that's going to be a cycle unfolding over the next couple of years. Really going to have to be having some focus um, on on money and resources and how you approach that emotionally and how it affects your soul and spiritually too. Maybe you start making a whole lot of money and you need to do some work with your relationship to money to make sure that that doesn't rot your soul, some great books for anybody going through a series of eclipses in their second and eighth houses, I think, are Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein, Money and Gift in the Age of Transition, I think is the full title, and also The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist, Soul and Money. Um, Both great for whether you're going through a period of time where you don't feel like you have money and resources, or you're heading in maybe into a time when you're going to have a lot more money and resources. Um, so, so yeah, for Virgos and Pisces, those are my book recommendations for you. That's how I should just do this whole thing. I just come up with book recommendations for every sign for their eclipses. Maybe next time. Okay. All right. So I'm super hungry and starving, and I'm gonna go get something to eat. I hope this did something for somebody, anybody. If this was of service to anybody, even just one person, it was worth it. Hi, Dan. Oh, thank you. And yeah, thank you for being here with me. Anybody that was here with me, and anybody that tunes in later, feel free to comment and tell me anything that resonated or didn't resonate, or any questions you might have, and I will try to get back to you. Okay. Happy lunar eclipse. I just said solar and lunar eclipse so many times. I'm tongue tied. Okay. Happy lunar eclipse. Happy Halloween. and happy haunting and happy Day of the Dead. All right, love you guys. Bye.